Professora Feenberg, estou muito feliz e muito grata em ter essa oportunidade de conversar com o senhor, que para nós, no Brasil, e para nós que estamos aqui, é uma referência em tecnologia, em teoria crítica da tecnologia. Eu sou, então, de Goiás, e conheci os estudos do Feenberg no doutorado em educação, em 2014. Busca de romper com instrumentalismos e determinismos, foi quando eu conheci a proposição da teoria crítica da tecnologia. Muito obrigada, e confesso que eu realmente estou muito emocionada, difícil de conter a emoção com esse carinho e essa receptividade. Foi o maior presente que eu já tive nos últimos tempos. Bom, aqui nós temos orientandos meus de pesquisa, Denise, André, Carmen, Matheus, são estudantes de mestrado em educação. André amanhã será mestre, será a defesa dele. Karina, pode se apresentar.
Olá, eu sou Karina Flexo, eu sou da Faculdade de Comunicação da Universidade de Brasília, UNB. Agradeço muito o privilégio de estar aqui, Cláudia, Lira, muito obrigada, muito prazer em conhecê-lo.
Professora Lira.
Meu programa da Universidade Estadual de Goiás, de mestrado, é o Programa Interdisciplinar em Educação, Linguagem e Tecnologia de Mestrado.
Pleased to be with you, even though we're actually very far apart. Talk to you about philosophy of technology, and also I've written a new book on Marcuse, which will appear. I have, of course, been involved with education as a professor, and a philosophy professor, and a communication professor for many years. But I was also involved in the very first experiments in online education. So you might want to ask me some questions about those early experiences back in the early 1980s.
Eu gostaria de saber, uma pergunta que eu digo que eu sou muito curiosa, se o professor Feenberg tem um olhar da fenomenologia.
Yes, I have been very influenced by phenomenology since my student days. I feel philosophies of experience of all kinds are of great importance. We cannot simply accept that the world as science presents it is the whole world. There's a lot of other things going on at the level of our lived experience. It's not that science is wrong. I'm not anti-scientific. It's just that there's more to experience than can be encompassed by the methods of natural science. We need philosophy and experiential thinking to make sense of the world we actually live in.
Então, e como que ficaria, então, a relação com Karl Marx na construção da teoria crítica da tecnologia? Karl Marx seria mesmo um determinista social? Ou, acrescentando, ou um construtivista?
Marx has been interpreted in many different ways. It's very difficult to be sure what he really intended. Among the interpretations that I think are most convincing are constructivist interpretations. Of course, there's a very broad what would you say, a very broad perspective which appears deterministic. Because, I mean, he does believe that the ability of human beings to transform nature and make it useful for themselves, that's the basis of civilization. And different modes of transformation of nature give different civilizations. But that doesn't really solve any problems in the present. In our actual practical experience in the present, we have to act out of intentions, ideologies, beliefs, and none of these are determined by, in some absolute way, by social forces. In practice, Marxism, I think, should be an active philosophy, not a. It's not about predicting the future, it's about making the future.
Então, o marxismo ocupa bom espaço ainda hoje, mas requer ter outro olhar a ele.
I think it does play a significant role, but it's very confused now. That role is very confused because the collapse of the Soviet Union and what has happened in China really means that we don't know what socialism would be like. We have no model. And that makes it very difficult to know what Marxism really is telling us. So we're better at complaining about capitalism than we are at inventing an alternative.
Parênteses, a Keren levantou a mão, e a Keren é uma pesquisadora que leu profundamente as obras de Andrew Feenberg e fez contato com ele. Keren, você deseja falar algo?
Hello, Professor Andrew Feenberg. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Are you Freire?
Yes,
Karen,
I am
Karen?
Karen. Yes,
Yes, I hear
we
you.
talked in some emails, and I want to talk to you that I am very honored to be here and talk directly with you. I am very grateful for Cláudia that organized this moment for us. I study your ideas, and I want to do some questions, but first I want to hear about your ideas about technology. But I am very honored and very constrangida, quebrantada to be here. I am very happy and very grateful for you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, very glad to be here. I want some questions, but first I want to hear you about your ideas. Thank you so much.
Duda, às vezes ele deseja ficar à vontade agora para o que ele gostaria de tratar.
Okay. Since I don't really know for sure what it is you want me to talk about, I'll keep it short, and then you can ask more questions. But let me tell you something about my ideas about technology. Okay, well, let me say something then. My original engagement with the problem of technology was with Heidegger and Marcuse. In other words, with approaches to technology that saw it as profoundly destructive. At the same time, it seemed obvious that you could have no modern society without technology. So there's a kind of paradox. The important critical work on technology and seem to contradict the possibilities of modernity. Some people drew the conclusion that you should withdraw from the technological society altogether, go back to the woods. But I grew up in New York City, and for me, the idea of going back to the woods seems absurd. So I then, somewhat later, after these early experiences with Heidegger and Marcuse's work, I began to actually engage with technology directly. I had the opportunity to work with technical systems. And then I discovered something that I had not understood before, namely that technology is much more flexible than it appeared in the works of the philosophers I had studied. So we could imagine a technological society very different from the one in which we live. I'll briefly mention the two experiences that had the most impact on me. I worked at one point in the 1970s in a medical research institute. So we engaged in medical experimentation on human subjects for a disease for which there was no treatment and no cure. Well, I did some research on how to do this, on what would be an ethical and humane way to engage in experimental treatment. It turned out that there was no truly scientific formula. You could engage in experimentation in very different ways. So, of course, there were some constant elements that you had to take care of for the experiment to be valid, but the human dimension of the experiment could be very different. So it could be dehumanizing, or it could be a social experience, could be an educational activity. All these are possibilities. And science doesn't determine how to do it. You have to make the decision. And a few years later, I was asked to participate in the development of an online educational system. You have to understand the conditions. In 1981, we started out. We had 300 baud modems. We had 48K of
Internet?
Of 48K of bytes in the computer's memory. You can't imagine what it was like. The keyboard only gave capital letters. You needed special equipment to get both capital and small letters. No one had done much. There were 2 or 3 courses that had been offered before we created our system. In the course of working on this online education system, I realized that we were actually transforming the nature of the computer. The computer was becoming a communication system, a human communication system. Not just before, it was a filing system, it was a calculating system, and now it was becoming a communication system. And we were making this happen. Around this time, the social constructivists were beginning to develop new ways of understanding science and technology. I remember Bruno Latour was a neighbor, and we talked about this new approach. These social constructivists, and they seem to have a completely different way of viewing technology from Heidegger and Marcuse, who I had read as a student. Their approach made more sense of my own experiences with technology. I could not give up on the idea that somehow larger social issues were involved with technology. The sort of issues that emerged from, say, Marcuse's Marxist critique. I began to think about how to put together the two sources of my experience with technology, my understanding of technology. The Marcuse and Heidegger on the one side and constructivism on the other. How could they be synthesized? It's rather difficult to explain than what I did in a few words. So that is the origin of my work on technology. I'm hoping that you will have read enough that you have a good idea. Basically, the approach is, in the constructivist world, active actors change the design of technology. The design of technology is, in other words, socially constructed. Most of the constructivist work is quite specific to individual technologies, and actors are those who are directly involved with those technologies. I thought about transferring this approach to the level of civilization. For example, capitalist societies design technologies in function of certain imperatives. Control of the workforce by management is essential. That affects the kind of technologies that are innovated. For example, the assembly line is a good case of control through technology. Capitalists, the actors involved are capitalists and their agents. Workers are not actors in the construction of these technologies under capitalism. So this has consequences for the kind of technology that is produced, the nature of work, and the products. You can think of this as a kind of generalized constructivism, not about particular technologies, but about whole regions of technology. And then the alternative would, of course, be the designs that would result from, for example, worker control. Those designs might be incompatible with capitalist control of the workforce. So I started out with these ideas, and then gradually the social world changed. My original notions were largely an attempt to make a kind of constructivist version of Marxism. In the 1970s and 80s, social movements around technology began to develop of a new kind. There were movements around nuclear power, around environmental problems like air pollution, around medical issues, specifically around the obstetrics. AIDS is SIDA. So this is also an important issue in this new type of technological struggle that emerged in the 70s and 80s. And that changed my perspective. So I began to see that technology had so completely covered over every aspect of social life in modern societies that it's not only workers who have a problem. So it looked to me like Marx had found something very important. Where technology is present, there people are assembled and suffer and can resist. But in his day, that was really only in factories and on ships. Now people are assembled by technology in many, many ways, not simply by their work in factories or boats, but also in all sorts of experiences they are engaged in the community, in medicine, in education, in every field. So the idea that once people are brought together by technology, they have problems and they can fight to improve their condition, Marx's original notion now concerns the whole, all spheres of society, not just the factory. Well, we may not get the revolution Marx expected from this situation, but he gives us the elements of a political philosophy of technology. So I'll stop there and wait for you to provoke me with questions.
Eu gostaria de realizar uma pergunta. Quando o senhor pensou os eixos alternativos para a compreensão da tecnologia, a partir dali teve o instrumentalismo, determinismo, substantivismo, e aí surgiu ali a teoria crítica da tecnologia. Hoje, organizaria esses eixos da mesma forma?
Yeah, I think I remember I made a chart. Actually, the four types of theories of technology comes from a book by Albert Borgman. And then I put it into a chart and made it more easily understandable what the alternatives were. So the four types, so the instrumentalism and substantivism and determinism were three of the possible philosophies of technology. And then I added a fourth, critical theory. And the critical theory, in a way, crosses the boundary between these different approaches. So, I mean, very briefly, the instrumental theories argue that we can do with technology what we wish. It's up to us. But they only work at the level of the individual possibilities offered by existing technology. What you can do is, what are the different things that the technologies that exist will allow you to do? And the substantivist theories argue that the technology as such has consequences. So it changes the nature of social reality independent of what you do with it. So critical theory, I argued, would be, critical theories of technology would be theories that argued that the design of technologies and the systems within which the technologies function are can be altered by human beings. But once you've created the system and the design, it has the effects, the value effects that substantivism attributes to it. So the instrumentalist view of the National Rifle Association in America holds that people don't kill people, guns don't kill people, people kill people. In other words, the guns are innocent, they are neutral. It's the people who do the harm. The critical view would hold that the technology itself creates a new situation in which gun violence is made possible. So you can't say that the technology is innocent, since it is part of a way of life in which gun violence plays a significant role. So that's a very simple way of understanding the difference. But you could think of other examples. For example, my experience of Sao Paulo and Beijing and Los Angeles is especially an experience of traffic jams. So this is the result of a civilizational choice of what is a city. The city design is responsible for this situation. The city could be redesigned in such a way as to provide public transportation, bicycles, you can imagine a whole different way of organizing the city that would avoid the catastrophe that is now these large cities' traffic. So the critical issue is not at the level of the technology, specific technology like the car. The critical issue is at the level of the system within which the car plays a role. So you can see the critical theory draws from instrumentalism, the notion that human beings can affect the technical world. It is not, as determinism might hold, or substantivism, a destiny. But on the other hand, like substantivism, it points out that the technologies, as in the systems of technologies, embody values. They frame a way of life. So this is why a politics of technology emerges from critical theory, because it shows that we can change technology, but at the level of the system, not at the individual level of particular devices. Technologies can be changed at the systemic level, and that's a political task.
One question. What are the most significant results in your research from your relationship with Bruno Latour in actor network theory? Did you understand me?
Can you repeat your question? Your voice is not loud.
What were the most significant results and the results in your research with your relationship with Bruno Latour in actor network theory?
Well, I learned some things from him, but I also had some big disagreements. In the early phase of his work, everything was really very specific to specific technologies, specific actors. When we conversed about the problems of society in general, he rejected, he said, that's just Marxism, forget it.
Yeah. Idea human and no human, an actor network theory, human and no human, humanos and no humanos.
Well,
human and no human.
Yeah, then he came up with this idea that what he called the agency of things, the symmetry of humans and non-humans.
Yeah.
You know this theory? And by this he meant that human beings and things both act in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's no special difference between them. They both act.
Yeah.
This idea comes from semiotics, where it makes sense in terms of how you analyze texts like novels. Take an example. Suppose that, well, say it's a movie, and on the screen you see two people fighting, and there's a gun, and they're fighting to get the gun. The gun is just as much an actor as the people. The gun makes things happen. The people make things happen, so does the gun. So you can imagine transposing this idea to the world in general. My problem with this is that earthquakes work by causal mechanisms. People have intentions. It's not the same. So the difference between causality and intention is lost in Latour's theory. That makes a politics of technology very difficult to imagine. On the other hand, he did invent one wonderful concept with this idea. In his theory, things are always connected to each other in networks. Networks have a network is constituted by what he calls a program. You want to build a house, you collect pieces of wood, nails, hammers, saws, and you have a program for putting all these things together that forms a network, which in this case takes the place as a house. But the clouds in the sky have a program too, which consists in dumping rain on your house. And if your roof is not good, the program of the clouds will destroy your house. So you can call the clouds program the anti-program of your program. It's the anti-program. So, I mean, my example is silly, but it is what Latour intends by the agency of things and the symmetry of human and non-human. Let's forget about this symmetry argument and just use the concept of anti-program to talk about human beings. So then you can see how useful the notion of network is for a politics of technology. Different actors engage with the same network with different programs. The factory pollutes the water in the town. That corresponds to the program of the owners of the factory who need to evacuate its wastes. The community creates its anti-program to protect its water by going to court and asking the judge to stop the factory from polluting its water. Well, I could explain this in much greater detail, but this is just an idea that I took from Latour, which I use in my own work. Unfortunately, he did not use this idea. In his later work, he became concerned about the environment. And he tried to develop a philosophy of the environment on the basis of his notion of symmetry. The results are, to my mind, very disappointing. He seems to think that the main cause of environmental problems is our bad attitude. We have this modern notion that we are separate from nature. That is irrelevant. What's relevant is the forces of the market in a capitalist society. But poor Latour could never embrace this Marxist idea.
Também de realizar uma pergunta sobre inteligência artificial, chat GPT, por exemplo, como podemos utilizar agora a teoria crítica da tecnologia nesse mar da inteligência artificial?
Well, I have not tried to think through the implications of artificial intelligence. What it can do now is quite remarkable compared to what we thought it was capable of in the past. You can think of very different designs for these new systems. Well, the social world has to adjust to these systems. The teachers can no longer rely on papers written at home. All the student papers will be written in class now. There are certain professional activities that might be replaced. A friend of mine in the movie industry gave me an example. When the people involved in setting up a movie project get together, they have an artist with them to quickly draw examples of what things would look like on the screen. But perhaps you could replace them with chat AI. So some professions may be affected, but in the end, the systems have very severe limits and will probably always have severe limits. I'm thinking about the effect of photography in the 19th century. At first, people thought painting will disappear because photography is so much better. But two things to take into account. Painting changed to do something photography can't do. It became impressionistic, abstract, and so on. So it did not disappear. And then also something else happened. or it was always there, but it wasn't noticed at first. The photographer makes many images and chooses one. The choice is an aesthetic choice, which the camera cannot make. Only a person can make the aesthetic choice. So I think something similar may happen with the attempt to use AI for creative work. So when you see a photograph, you think of the person who made the photograph as the artist, not the camera, because you know that it's selected from thousands of images.
Meire?
One more? Okay.
Boa noite, professora. Tudo bem? Eu sou a Meire e trabalho um pouco com essa área, estudo um pouco nessa área, e trabalhei no Univac 9030 na década de 70, 80, e trabalhei com cartão perfurado. Isso.
With old computers.
Isso.
Yes.
E eu já encomendei o lançamento do livro Construtivismo Crítico, uma filosofia da tecnologia, e pela resenha crítica me interessou muito o fato que o senhor aborda no livro. De acordo com o que está colocado no livro, o cerne do construtivismo crítico está atrelado à dimensão política da tecnologia, e apontando a necessidade de se construir uma política democrática para essa discussão. O senhor sabe o quanto aqui no Brasil ainda é vulnerável à discussão democrática. Temos há pouco tempo acontecido alguns problemas sérios políticos no regime político brasileiro. E o quanto me interessou o fato do quanto é imprescindível a discussão desses projetos democráticos, tanto na micropolítica quanto na macropolítica. Então, eu gostaria que o senhor falasse um pouco sobre esses possíveis projetos, né, voltado à filosofia da tecnologia, e que possa abordar, possa trazer essa discussão democrática nesses projetos.
Well, in terms of politics, the key idea to keep in mind that philosophy of technology offers is the non-deterministic view of technological development. The ideology of the neoliberal ideology would like you to believe that there's only one path to prosperity. So anything else that you might consider important is going to lead to poverty. So we need philosophy of technology in the political domain primarily to make sure we don't believe that idea, that deterministic idea. That deterministic idea eliminates technology from politics. There is no politics of technology if technology can only develop in one way. The other significant idea that I think is useful politically is the notion that different actors can contribute to different designs of technical systems. If you increase the number of actors, not just businesses, but also workers, also communities, also social groups that have been excluded. If you increase the number of actors, you can obtain a better technological result. So those are ideas that philosophers of technology mostly agree with that can be useful for talking about politics.
Cláudia.
Eu gostaria de agradecer, professor Feenberg. Sua fala trouxe pontos muito importantes para continuarmos os nossos estudos e as nossas pesquisas. Acredito que o caminho para os estudos encontram-se na filosofia da tecnologia. Realmente não tenho palavras pelo tamanho da gratidão por esse momento.
She's speechless.
Now you can see that. I'm very happy to have made her speechless. I hope that you can continue to work on philosophy of technology and make some contribution. Brazil is a special case because of the Amazon, because of the tremendous wealth of resources. It really needs to have a better understanding of technology and a politics of technology that makes sense.
Professora, eu queria te agradecer, porque durante o meu mestrado, o senhor me ajudou muito junto com a professora Cláudia, né? Vocês dois foram minha base, meu fundamento. E eu falo para você, professor, com bastante, assim, certeza que eu saí também cheia de dúvidas, porque eu quis saber mais. Eu saí da minha dissertação pensando assim, eu tenho muito a estudar, né? Porque quando a gente vai lendo seu material, vai abrindo outras perspectivas. E se um dia o senhor tiver mais disposição, né, a gente te convida a trazer outras discussões, como a questão da tecnocracia, a relação com a fenomenologia, né, o debate político, até onde o marxismo alcança, não alcança, porque quando eu li o seu trabalho, e é uma longa jornada de trabalho que o senhor tem, publicações, o senhor traz muitas questões. Eu pensava que era simples, e não é simples, é muito complexo. Technocracy, phenomenology, Marxism, Foucault, you wrote about so many things.
Marcuse,
Heidegger, so many things.
Yes, I understand. But you can send me emails and I will respond.
Okay.
That will be fun.
Muito, muito obrigada. Desejar o senhor descansar, o senhor deve estar cansado aqui, dispôs desse tempo incrível conosco e saímos daqui com muito desejo de continuar a sua leitura. E particularmente quero muito ler também a sua compreensão sobre a respeito ali de Marcuse. Muito obrigada, professor Feenberg.
Thank you so much, professor.
Se desejar, se eu puder contribuir com algo, estou sempre à disposição do senhor também.
And
Bye-bye.
anything you need, we are also available. Thank you so much, Professor. Bye-bye. Tchau, tchau.
Ciao.
Bye, bye. Tchau.